Continuing on from last time, Scream Ride was released on March 3rd, 2015 for the Xbox One and 360. It is a construction simulator and puzzle game developed by Frontier Developments, who worked on the classic Roller Coaster Tycoon series. There are 3 modes to the game: Engineer, where the player solves puzzles by developing new rides and courses; Demolition Expert, where the player does an Angry Bird-like demolition of skyscrapers; and Scream Rider, where the player controls the roller coaster itself and tries to get the most thrill from the riders. Combined, these 3 modes offer quite a lot of content and variety as the player makes their way across several different continents, taking on increasingly difficult challenges. While there is not a multiplayer mode, players can compare their scores on an online leaderboard. Unfortunately, the game came and went without much fanfare and did not leave a lasting legacy, despite receiving fairly positive reviews from critics. I assume that sales for the title were pretty small. Metacritic gave a 71, users a 4.8, IGN an 8.2, and I give it a 7 out of 10. I really enjoyed the Demolition Expert mode, and the other 2 modes offer some fun, but it is not the most memorable game and was quickly overshadowed by the next Xbox release. Ori and the Blind Forest came a week later on March 11th, 2015 for Windows and Xbox One. It was later ported to the Switch in September 2019. Ori is developed by Moon Studios and is a Metroidvania platformer. Despite Moon Studios being a small team without a centralized office location, they delivered a masterpiece. Ori has an incredible story as the main character takes on the adventure of restoring balance to the forest and saving the lives of the forest inhabitants. The artwork and music are both stunningly beautiful. The game is very challenging and the player will die many times. A unique feature is the checkpoint system called Soul Links, where the player creates their own checkpoints if they have enough of a resource. With the difficulty of the game, this feature adds to the challenge of completing obstacles. There are also very intense escape sequences at the end of each dungeon. The game sold very well for an indie title and was profitable for the developer and Microsoft. It was a much needed win for the Xbox platform and the indie genre at the time. Metacritic gave an 88, users an 8.5, IGN an 8.6, and I give a 10 out of 10. The game was a very moving experience personally and was a very pleasant surprise to play through. I was left wanting a sequel which would not be received until 2020. Rare Replay was a surprise announcement at E3 2015 and released a few months later on August 4th, 2015. Surprisingly, it never came to PC. It is a 30-game collection of the developer Rare's 35-year history, starting with 1983's Jetpack all the way up to 2008's Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Some of the highlight games across the years that were included are RC Pro-Am, Battletoads, Banjo-Kazooie, Perfect Dark, Viva Pinata, and a lot more. Unfortunately, there are several titles that could not be included that Rare developed that had other licensing issues involved, such as the N64's GoldenEye. Fun fact, at the time of this collection's release, Xbox One had more N64 titles available than the Nintendo Wii U did. The game included a ton of achievements and behind-the-scenes content from the developers. There was also a rewind feature to make some of the challenges of archaic games more tolerable. The game was well received and likely had decent sales for a collection of remastered games. Metacritic gave an 84, users a 9, IGN a 7.9, and I give Rare Replay an 8 out of 10, as it has several excellent games that I played as a child and teenager, which were fun to revisit. There are quite a few titles that are either too dated or I have no interest in, but that does not make the collection any less impressive. This collection shows Rare's long and impressive history as a game developer. Gears of War Ultimate Edition released on August 25th, 2015 for Xbox One and later on March 1st, 2016 for PC. It was developed as the first title from the Coalition, the current studio charged with developing Gears of War titles. The Ultimate Edition is a remaster of Gears of War 1 and releases 9 years after the original. It includes a host of improvements to the original and included a few chapters that were exclusive to the PC at the time and not included on the 360 original. Multiplayer also made a return from the original, and a multiplayer beta for Gears of War 4 was included. Backwards compatible downloads of Gears 2, 3, and Judgment were included, making this an impressive collection for the Gears series. Despite the age of the original game and the flaws associated, the Ultimate Edition was well received and sold well, breathing life back into the Gears franchise. Metacritic gave an 82, users an 8.5, IGN a 7.6, and I give an 8 out of 10. I was in college during the original Gears craze, and I missed out on that train. The Ultimate Edition gave me the opportunity to experience the original Gears and get into the series, and the package deal of all the Gears games helped me catch up before Gears 4 launched. On September 15, 2015, Forza Motorsport 6 launched on Xbox One. It was developed by Turn 10 Studios, and of all the motorsport titles I have played, this one seems the most fun and user-friendly. This is Turn 10 at the top of their game. A toned-down free-to-play version came to Windows the following September. Motorsport 6 features several new elements which were added or returned to this title, such as rain and night racing, and a new story mode. The game had more than 450 cars and 27 tracks at launch. With all of these details and a long career mode and multiplayer, Motorsport 6 offers a tremendous amount of content without feeling like a total grind. The game was very well received, sold over 1 million copies in 2015, and along with the Horizon series at the time, had several million active players as part of the Forza player base. Metacritic gave an 87, users a 9, IGN a 7.7, and I give an 8 out of 10. Of all the motorsport games, this is my favorite. It offers a bit of everything to every kind of car player, was a big improvement from the 5th game, and was all around a lot of fun. I still enjoy the Horizon series more overall, but this is driving simulation at its finest. Halo 5 Guardians was the final title of 2015 from the Xbox family. It released on October 27, 2015. It was developed by 343 Industries and added quite a few new features to the series, some of them good, others less so. Halo 5 introduces Agent Locke and his team, and they take the majority of the campaign, which is one of the divisive decisions to the game. The lack of Master Chief content was a bit of a shock. The marketing campaign that led up to the game was also a problem, as it did not tie in with the game very well. This is the only Halo mainline game that lacks split screen, which was sacrificed in order to achieve a solid 60 frames per second experience. Those are some of the more hated features of the game. On the positive side, the multiplayer offered several new modes including Warzone, Warzone Firefight, and Breakout, and had a ton of post-launch content for free. The campaign makes the player feel powerful and added a few new moves like Spartan Charge, Ground Pound, and Dash. Halo 5 was a big financial success at launch, but did not have a long-lasting presence in the gaming world, although 5 years later it is still very easy to get onto matchmaking. Metacritic gave an 84, users a 6.4, IGN a 9, and I also give it a 9 out of 10. Even though the campaign story derailed and was not the direction I wanted the game to go, the single player is still a good experience, and the multiplayer is excellent. Quantum Break starts off 2016 and released on April 5th for Xbox One and Windows PC. It was developed by Remedy Entertainment and continues their style of third-person action-adventure titles, this one dealing with time travel and manipulation. This game was announced way back when the Xbox One was first announced, and was the long-promised meld of television and gaming. The game was divided into several chapters, and between each chapter there was a 20-minute episode. Choices made in the game had small effects on the episodes and succeeding chapters. It had an impressive cast doing the voices and motion capture. The gameplay was enjoyable and varied, although it is a pretty short single-player experience. It was the best-selling new intellectual property launched on the Xbox One at that time, and seemed to have a good launch window, though not good enough for Microsoft or Remedy to pursue a sequel. But hopefully someday. Metacritic gave a 77, users a 7.2, IGN an 8, and I give an 8 as well, as I enjoy the style of Remedy's storytelling, and I found the gameplay to be a lot of fun. I wish focus had been given more to the game rather than the TV show, but it was very experimental at the time, and maybe it did not land how users wanted. I still give props for taking the risk. Recore launched on September 13, 2016 for Xbox One and Windows PC. It was re-released as a definitive edition in August 2017. Recore was developed by Armature Studios and is an action-adventure platformer. It takes place on a colony world in the future and allows the main character Jewel as she tries to restore the colony to the utopia it was supposed to be. Her allies are friendly robots called Corebots, and the cores play a central part of gameplay and the story. There are puzzles and dungeons to explore, extra challenges and bosses, plenty of content to digest here. The big problem with the game at launch were the loading times and technical issues. The final section of the game also could be a grind and unnecessarily challenging. The definitive edition addressed some of these issues and added additional content. Unfortunately, Recore did not make a big splash when it launched, and likely was a disappointment to Microsoft and Armature. No sequel plans have ever been stated. Metacritic gave a 63, users a 6.7, IGN a 7.3, and I give Recore a 7 out of 10. It was a new IP that had a lot of risk, but to me it was worth the risk. Despite the technical issues, I really enjoyed the main character and her gang of robot friends as they explored a wild desert landscape. The third entry of the Forza Horizon series released on September 23, 2016 on Xbox One and Windows. It was developed by Playground Games, and this open-world racing entry is set in Australia. Playground definitely nailed it with this one. The setting of Australia offered lots of amazing backgrounds. There is a ton of content and built on a lot of what worked well for Horizon 2. Instead of one Horizon festival in the center of the map, there are several festivals that the player builds up in popularity and fandom as the player does all kinds of events across the map. 2 major expansions were released, one on a snowy mountain, and then a surprise Hot Wheels expansion that was pure racing joy as players raced around huge Hot Wheels tracks on a new island. The game is incredibly welcoming and has over 350 cars at launch, with many more added later. The game was a huge hit with a strong player base and over 2.5 million copies sold. Metacritic gave a 91, users an 8.0, IGN a 9.5, and I give a 10 out of 10. This is a smash hit that built on the previous entries and delivered an incredibly fun racing game that doubles as an awesome open world version of Australia to be explored. I can't sing enough praise for this game and recommend it to anyone. Gears of War 4 is the last title of 2016 and was released on October 11th for Xbox One and Windows. It is the first real entry from the Coalition and follows the original trilogy's fallout 25 years later. The torch is passed from Marcus Phoenix to his son and friends as they must face new and old threats. The game is an impressive technical showcase with lots of new weather effects and many new kinds of enemies. Some criticism towards the game is that the story played it too safe and retreads some familiar narratives. Multiplayer was also a steady entry in the usual Gears style. The game was a big seller at release and seemed to be a strong step forward as the Coalition takes over the Gears story, and it laid the groundwork for future Gears games, either as a new trilogy or a new series of stories. Metacritic gave an 84, users a 6.9, IGN a 9.2, and I give an 8 out of 10. I enjoyed the new cast and the new story, but at times it felt like more of the same. Still good, but feeling a bit weary. However, the game looks and sounds amazing. It is quite impressive, and after it got a 4K upgrade for the One X, it became even more impressive looking. Halo Wars 2 starts off 2017 and was released on February 21st for Xbox One and Windows. It is a real-time strategy game developed by Creative Assembly and 343 Industries. The game takes place about 2 decades after the first entry and ties in a bit more closely with the overall Halo storyline. There are only 2 sides to the conflict, the UNSC and a new faction called the Banished, but players choose from several leaders which dictate their style, special units, and leader powers. A handful of additional leaders were added post-launch and increased the variety of tactics in the game. A new game mode called Blitz was introduced for fast card-based action. The campaign offered about 15 missions of varying styles of strategy, and additional content added several more missions and a new firefight mode against the Flood. The game was well received by critics, but likely was not the big financial hit 343 was hoping for. No word on a sequel has been announced. Metacritic gave a 79, users a 6.2, IGN a 7, and I give a 9 out of 10. I really appreciate getting a real-time strategy game on console that functions well, and I poured a lot of time into the online multiplayer and playing against the computer. It was fun to try out each leader and the different types of tactics that could be deployed. Though the game has some minor issues, I really had a good time. Cuphead was an indie title developed by Studio MDHR and released for Xbox One and Windows on September 29th, 2017. It was later released on Mac in October 2018 and the Nintendo Switch in April 2019. It also is included with Tesla vehicles. The game is a run-and-gun 2D shooter and allows 1 or 2 players to take on incredibly difficult levels in a 1930s art style. The art style works really well and catches anyone's gaze, and the accompanying soundtrack is also excellent. Most levels are boss fights that evolve as the fight progresses. Join Cuphead as he tries to pay off his debts to the devil and ultimately take down the devil himself. This game was teased for years at big gaming events, and upon release was a big hit for the studio. The game sold over 5 million copies by its second anniversary and was a critical darling. Metacritic gave an 86, users an 8.4, IGN an 8.8, and I give a 9 out of 10. Although a very challenging experience, Cuphead is a very fresh kind of game that brings players into a unique style of play. I enjoyed the style and the challenge, and even though it took a while to finally bring down the devil, Cuphead is a great deal at just $20 and should be experienced by just about everyone. Forza Motorsport 7 was released on October 3, 2017 for Xbox One and Windows. It was developed by Turn 10 like its predecessors and was used to showcase the 4K and frame rate abilities of the One X. The game launched with a massive 700 plus cars and 32 racing locations. Dynamic weather was introduced and a greater focus on player customization and cosmetics was implemented, which was not a decision received well by me. As it is the 7th entry, the driving and gameplay are very fine-tuned and run smoothly. Graphics and sounds received a big improvement and the number of cars is just insane. The tracks all play really well and offer all kinds of settings and scenery. Critics reviewed the game quite well and sales of the game seem pretty similar with other recent motorsport entries. Metacritic gave an 86, players a 6.2, IGN a 9.2, and I give an 8 out of 10. I personally enjoyed Motorsport 6 more as I found it more inviting and fun to play, but this 7th game is really impressive technically and shows off the power of 4K and HDR visuals. Turn 10 have mastered this racing simulation, and as one reviewer wrote, it is a love letter to car fans. Super Lucky's Tale is the last release of this year and came out on November 7th, 2017. It was the only launch title for the One X and also released for Windows, followed by an expanded version of the game coming to the Switch in 2019 and the PlayStation 4 in 2020. Super Lucky's Tale was developed by Playful Corp, and the original Lucky's Tale was a VR title for the Oculus Rift. This game is a platformer similar to the style of Banjo-Kazooie and 3D Mario titles. There are 5 worlds for Lucky to explore as he tries to take control of the Book of Ages from an evil cat family called the Kitty Litter. There are both 2D and 3D levels with puzzles and boss fights sprinkled throughout. The game came and went with a mixed reception, though it is a very family-friendly title and easy for young audiences to pick up. Metacritic gave a 64, users a 7.0, IGN a 5, and I give it a 6 out of 10. The game is charming and goes for that 90s style of platforming, but it is a bit too tame and simple for a longtime gamer like me. I recognize I may not be the exact audience for this game.